All right. Hello and welcome everybody to this Cargill webinar produced by Hatch. My name is Moritz Mueller. I'm the head of marketing and communications at Hatch, and I have the pleasure of moderating this outstanding panel today. Our 45-minute conversations will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A session, so feel free to send your questions through the chat on YouTube or Facebook anytime. My colleague is monitoring that and will send them through to me. Our topic today is innovation for sustainable seafood growth, and it is a pressing topic indeed. The world now produces more than 155 million tons of seafood every year. Around 55% of that comes from aquaculture. As our population is growing, demand continues to rise. And within the next 50 years, we will have to grow more seafood than we have ever grown in the entire existence of mankind. At the same time, understanding the limits of our oceans and protecting them in order to keep our planet healthy is an essential task. This seafood and the feed for it will not come from our wild stocks, but it has to come from aquaculture. And only an industry that is sustainable will be able to shoulder such a responsibility. Our common mission is to impact the sustainability of aquaculture. And we understand that this is only possible when the whole value chain is involved and can effectively collaborate. As a catalyst for aquaculture innovation worldwide, Hatch is glad to bring you such high-profile panelists today. They are Dr. Heidi Kuehnle, CEO and co-founder at Kuehnle Agro from Hawaii, Alfredo Tello, the sustainability lead at Salmones Camanchaca, Samuel Anderson, environmental advisor at Norway, and last, but certainly not least, Dr. Dave Robb, sustainability director at Cargill. We will now hear their intros from them personally. Alfredo, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Hatch and Cargill, for the invitation. It's always nice to have the chance to talk about sustainability and innovation, particularly at this challenging times that we're living. I work in Salmones Camanchaca. Salmones Camanchaca is a Chilean salmon farming company. We are exclusively based in Chile. We are a listed company, both in the Santiago and Oslo Stock Exchange. We have an annual production of roughly 55,000 tons of Atlantic salmon and 5,000 tons of Coho salmon, which is Pacific salmon, which is a new sort of venture we're starting to explore. And well, our value creation plan has three pillars. One is resource efficient growth. So we're aiming at achieving 75 to 80,000 tons in the next maybe 5 or 6 years, using our existing capacities. Focused market development is our second pillar. We're very focused on developing specific markets using our flexibility and processing, which is quite unique to our company. And the third one, which is obviously very relevant to our discussions today, is what we like to call progressive sustainability, which is tackling increasingly broader problems that affect our industry and our world, at large in terms of sustainability. So we believe that aquaculture and the ocean in general has a huge potential to alleviate some of the problems that face humanity. And as a company kind of culture, we believe that at the current stage, people and institutions of all types really have two alternatives. You can either, remain a spectator, or become an actor and try to solve these problems. There's no really middle ground for us. So we're working pretty hard on that with very targeted strategies. Well, happy to be here,
Great to have you all. Thank you. All right, Heidi, let's hear from you.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to be on this very distinguished panel. We're just a very small company, and we're called Kuehnle Agro-Systems. I run the company here in Honolulu, Hawaii. And what our company does is develop and produce microalgae-based ingredients for aquafeeds and a few other markets. And we do this through a breakthrough technology, which is to grow algae in complete darkness. There's no photosynthesis. We use fermentation tanks like you would grow beer yeast in. We grow our algae in these fermentation tanks. And that allows us to address a number of sustainability issues compared to legacy algae production technology like open raceway ponds or photobioreactors. So I'm trying to bring a little perspective as a small business onto the panel. And I'm drawing on our company's experience in talking with a number of potential customers in aquaculture. And that experience was gained mainly through our company's experience with the Hatch Aquaculture Business Accelerator. We were part of Cohort 2019, a group of companies that worked very closely with the Hatch organization. And through that experience, we met many key players in Norway, Singapore, and here in Hawaii as aquaculture hubs. And just three things that I wanted to bring out right at the beginning that we learned regarding sustainability. First, the major players, major feed manufacturers and investors, they are truly concerned with sustainability, which means that small businesses can't ignore it. Secondly, for any new ingredients, they must be cost competitive. So you really, sometimes when we start our new ventures, we think, oh, well, we can get a premium because our product is so amazing. But in fact, you have to be cost competitive with those less sustainable ingredients that are currently in use. And a third kind of point that we learned is that we were pleased to find that by adopting sustainable practices, we could actually reduce our operational costs and minimize our waste output. That was great to find through our engineering analysis. And just to tell you how that worked for us is that we were able, by going into fermentation tanks, we were able to reduce our water use by 1 order of magnitude. We were able to reduce our land footprint. Very important, there's no rainforest clearing involved anymore to produce these critical aquafeed components. And we could locate near major aquaculture or feed manufacturing centers. And then just because our fermentation is basically a kind of precision farming, we very precisely add nutrients to our algae. So they only eat the food they need and there's no polluting waste or runoff from this kind of agriculture. So that was another great finding as we went into this whole sustainability area. Thank you, Moritz.
Thank you, Heidi. You do fantastic things indeed. Samuel, let's hear from you.
Yes, very happy to be on again. So it's a distinguished panel today, and from a company called Nova Sea, and we're based in the north of Norway, and it's called the Helgeland region, which, if you know anything, I guess, about Norwegian geography, we're somewhere between Trondheim and Bodo, between those two places. So we produce around 50,000 tons annually, approximately, and we also have licenses to produce microalgae at a number of farms. We haven't started with that as of yet, but it's in the plans for the future. We're a family-owned and operated business. The founding family are still the majority owners of the company. And we're very anchored in the local communities here where we farm. So it's a very important aspect of the company, I think, and one of the things that I felt was most important when I came on board. And it's a company that has operations that go from broodstock to market. So we're able to deal with quality issues on the whole spectrum of production. Because of the fact that we have these small facilities and fleet of service boats, administration, and so on. And as far as sustainability goes, it's one of the main focuses of this company, has been for many years, both the environment and sustainable practice. One of the things we've done recently within the last few years is join the Global Salmon Initiative, which is a group that works towards with companies from all over the world. Camanchaca is also a member of it, to try to achieve 100% ASC, Aquaculture Stewardship Council certification within this year, actually. So we're up in 80% certification, and we're continuing to work towards 100% certification of our farms. And we've always had a very strong focus on sustainability reporting. And now, as of last year, we're doing that according to the GRI standard for sustainability reporting, and trying to connect even more the procedures and goals that we have as a company up towards the UN's SDGs. Now for the future, we're looking towards, I guess, technological innovation. Speak about this maybe in more detail, just because it's something I'm very interested in. But as far as the technology for environmental impact management and finding ways to maximize fish health and welfare, while at the same time minimizing your footprint on the local environment. And then we recently were giving some licenses for something called the spider cage, which is going to be a form of offshore farming. So it's a giant steel type cage of the type that we've seen come out here in Norway, which is a partnership between us and people that have previously been in the offshore industry. And I think that's really, that's one of the big things that Norway as a country has to contribute to this with salmon farming, is a technological push for the next step. This industry has advanced an enormous amount in the last 40 years, and I'm really happy to be on board to see where we're going in the future. So yeah, really excited to get to talk more about this today.
All right. Great, Samuel. Thank you. Before I introduce our last guests, I just want to quickly point out sustainability is a massive topic. And so we stay a little bit within a certain scope today. Dave Robb, the Director of Sustainability at Cargill, will introduce himself and also set the stage for today's scope. Robb, no, Dave, this way around. Go ahead.
Thanks, Moritz, and thank you, everyone. It's great to be here today with our colleagues on the panel. Obviously, it's always brilliant to be working with customers on sustainability. We have to work together as a value chain to deliver sustainable seafood to our markets. And it's really nice to meet Heidi today and learn about the production of novel ingredients into feed, which is how we're going to be able to develop the feed industry at the growth rate that we need to develop, as Alfredo talked about already. So I'm Sustainability Director for Cargill Aqua Nutrition, and Cargill Aqua Nutrition is the aquaculture feed group belonging to Cargill, family-owned American corporation integrated through global food systems. Cargill's goal is to work to nourish the world in a safe, responsible and sustainable way. And our aquaculture feeds supply farming operations for salmon, shrimp and other fish species around the world. You can learn more about our approach to sustainability through our annual sustainability report on the Cargill website at cargill.com. In terms of setting the stage for the scope of today's conversation, which also allows me to explain a little bit more about how we address sustainability in Cargill, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the importance that we associate with sustainability. Particularly in a world so affected by COVID-19 as we are at the moment, the importance of resilient food systems based on sustainable supply chains has become really obvious. We recognize that many consumers also equate issues such as sustainability and animal welfare with food that is healthy for them, and people want to eat healthy food. Sustainability of our food systems runs through the value chain, back from the consumers that eat the nutritious seafood we feed, through the farms that we work with, to the feed mills, and all the way back to the individual raw materials that we source from. To help map our impacts around sustainability, we refer to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which give a global common language around the various issues that we have to look at. And to understand how we impact sustainability through our business operations, we've called out 3 areas: healthy people, healthy animals, and a healthy planet. Concerning the healthy people, we look at the feed we produce, and through the feed, the seafood that grows on it, to provide protein, the fatty acids, EPA and DHA, and a range of vitamins and minerals that give seafood such a special place in our healthy diets. We also work to make feeds to keep the fish healthy on farm, so reducing the need for medications and particularly antibiotics. This can really help reduce the development of antimicrobial resistance, which is a key risk to human health. Both contribute to providing food and healthy nutrition. But we also help the people in the communities we operate in, and Samuel's just mentioned that, particularly important for Nova Sea and also in Chile. From suppliers to customers, we help generate jobs and incomes in rural communities around the world. and particularly coastal communities, which are often vulnerable. With relation to healthy animals, the farmers we supply all take care of the health and welfare of their stocks. And a key part of sustainability is the efficient use of resources, looking at how much is required to grow the seafood harvested at the end of each production cycle, not just the sustainability of the feed in isolation. Through research and development in our dedicated facilities, we apply innovations in our feed mills and to our customers around the world, developing the right feeds for the customers' animals in the wide range of environments they farm in, starting from the young animals and through to the core nutrition required for grow out towards harvest, helps us achieve the lowest potential food conversion ratio, or FCR. The situations on farm can change, and the health and welfare of the animals can become compromised. So we've also developed a range of feeds to help the fish recover from diseases without the resort to medication. This particularly helps the farm recover its efficiency and produce again more seafood with less feed. We've also worked on delivering innovations that can help identify diseases on farm more quickly. We have an innovation using a PCR machine to look at identifying specific diseases on shrimp farms and providing recommendations for appropriate feed regimes to alleviate the issue. Also working with digital tools to bring this information to our customers faster. This is particularly important in regions where veterinary support is limited or unavailable. And this talk around efficiencies leads us on to working towards a healthy planet. Resource efficiencies managing the food conversion ratio help us reduce the overall footprint of the seafood that's farmed at the end of the day. These effectively scale the footprint of the feed, so everything we can do with our customers to reduce their feed conversion ratio will help, from using the right feed at the right time, through managing the feed optimally, to getting the fastest growth rate on farm, which can help reduce, for example, the energy inputs on farm. We're developing a set of metrics based on life cycle analysis, or LCA, so that we can work with our customers to determine the footprint of their fish and where the greatest opportunities to reduce it lie. For example, one point of real interest to many farmers is how to reduce the carbon footprint of their seafood. One part of that footprint reduction lies with the factories that we operate, and we have an ambition in Cargill of reducing our Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas footprints by 10% by 2025. But we can also look at formulating specific feeds for our customers with lower footprints, working with our existing suppliers to reduce the impact of the products we buy from them all the way back to their origin. This could be on issues such as carbon footprint, but for soy, we also look at being deforestation free of all the soy we buy, and we've achieved this for all of our salmon feeds already. And for fish meal and oil, we work to source only from sustainably managed fisheries. Then we also have the opportunity to look at novel ingredients to be able to expand the raw material basket of nutrients that we have sustainably, potentially replacing some of the less sustainable raw materials, but also bringing more essential nutrients for the feed in future aquaculture expansion globally. So I'm really glad that Heidi is on the panel today to be able to talk more about novel ingredients.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. Heidi, why don't you pick that up? Sustainability will certainly be driven by innovation here. So what role do you see new and novel ingredients playing in advancing sustainability? And what are the key challenges faced by the industry and the companies like you bringing these ingredients into the market?
Yeah, this is definitely a very exciting time to be on the upside of the upstream part of the value chain, the ingredient side. And as Dave had alluded to, he had mentioned DHA and EPA, and also amino acids, proteins. There's a lot of focus for the new ingredients around this marine protein, marine oils for aqua feeds. And the innovations are trying to fill the gap that's developed between this increasing demand of proteins and oils for the fish farms and what has happened now with this world's dwindling supply of fish meal and fish oil that can't go into the feeds anymore because it's not, or it's very limited access now due to overfishing. And so these innovations are coming up with new sources of proteins, new sources of oils. those innovations can range the gamut from microbial fermentations, some of what we do with algae, but also there's other organisms like bacterial sources of protein, high protein. You can also source the protein from insects. There's high protein barley even out there that can be cultivated on very challenging lands like Northern Europe that are very close to our aquaculture center or our shipping centers. And they're coming in now to fill that gap for the oils and proteins. And many of these have been already successfully trialed in the salmonids and other aquaculture species, so that's terrific, and they're finding their way in. In fact, they already are in feeds that are being sold. The nice thing about some of these innovations, which we didn't perhaps have before, I'm talking about supply chain, is that especially ingredients that are coming from the microalgae or the microorganism fermentations, those can be delivered as year-round supply, and they have very consistent composition, consistent performance, and that's something that's really essential to securing the customers for those ingredients. But beyond the protein and oils, there's other innovations and other a lot of progress being made in bio-based ingredients for diets that can advance sustainability. The ones that come to mind, of course, I'm very algae focused, but I'm thinking about compounds that can support the immune system, like beta-glucans coming from algae, and that in return can reduce or even replace the use of antibiotics, which is super exciting. Or there's ingredients that can reduce stress in fish during the handling. And we were thinking that maybe as some of the aquaculture goes into these recirculating aquaculture systems, the RAS systems, that managing stress through diet and through algae ingredients perhaps can really be helpful in those intense aquaculture settings. And then people mentioned shrimp earlier, I think, that we think if you can have a bio-based solution to boosting shrimp's ability to resist disease threats, for example, Vibrio, if you can do that through incorporating some of these ingredients in the diet, that would be great. And then some of the innovations I can see is also replacing things like plastics, the black plastic liners they use in shrimp ponds to get that great shrimp color. Maybe you don't need that if you can just change a component in the diet in a safe manner, but that gives you that same color, so you don't need that black plastic, or at least reduce that plastic use. It's just a thought we have. I don't think anybody's doing that yet. But as shrimp production goes up, maybe that could be something of interest through the innovation. Yeah, and then just any kind of production that reduces waste, that reduces our natural resource use, that a lot of those innovations are now talking about how their solutions, how their raw material solutions can help check that list off for the feed supplier and for the farmer. You asked about key challenges. Well, there are key challenges. This can range from the uncertain regulatory environment, risk-averse venture capitalists, also scale-up challenges. But these aren't unusual by any means. Instead, what I think is a really key challenge is how does our company ensure that what we think or we're claiming is as a sustainable product, how does that actually resonate with our customers and our stakeholders? I mean, how do you measure it? How do we measure it? How do we qualify it? So one thing we did a few years ago is that we became certified. This was through the Global Impact Investing rating system. This is geared towards enhancing our company's attractiveness to impact investors. And so we did their comprehensive system for assessing our company. And by receiving a strong score, we were able to feel confident to say that we were at the forefront of creating sustainable algae-based products for our markets. And now, as we go into scale up and into commercial manufacturing, we are drawing on the Global Reporting Initiative onto their sustainability reporting standards. And for small businesses who may not have heard about it, this is the GRI. And it's very easy to sign up, and you can get access to the wealth of their documentation online, and that can help guide your thinking and also your implementation then as you get ready to bring your ingredients to the market.
You make a very interesting point there, Heidi. Thank you. It seems that transparency and traceability, after all, are underpinning sustainability. So, Alfredo, I'd like to ask you from the Chile perspective, what are the key innovations you see that are helping solve these transparency and traceability challenges? Are they there? Are they still needed? And what role does the collaboration play here? I'm sure you have some examples for us.
I think, traceability and transparency are probably synonyms, increasingly. There's recently a document by the United Nations highlighting that one of the key goals for sustainable seafood is for it to be fully traceable, So I think we have started to, every food producing industry, and company has in place a proper traceability system if you're supplying to global markets. But what we've probably started to do recently, and this is kind of the learning process that at least we are in and many other companies as well, is that we're starting to add or trace a lot more attributes to our products than we were originally doing, So now we're starting to kind of cling on environmental data, data about our communities, data about waste, so how much waste went into producing that salmon you're eating. And that is becoming possible because of innovations in technology. So you have, Internet of Things, which is basically as a concept, or as a broad technological concept, allowing us to capture a lot of data that previously was probably very difficult to do or impossible, in terms of cost, and operation. And obviously there's the blockchain, the blockchain allows, us to trace in a much more effective and transparent way all of our products. So definitely those innovations are in place. But I think that what's probably lacking, at least in our sector, I haven't seen it that fully developed, is for companies to embrace it, So for companies to fully embrace, a more robust, traceability system that are able to register new and novel attributes to their product. So when you look at other industries, every people I've spoken to at least that has started to measure, sustainability parameters, if you like, associated to their main product, almost all of them have found kind of new business opportunities tied to the fact that they were able to, find a new way to reduce waste or find a new way to generate value, out of the data they were incorporating into their product. So to sum that idea up, I think, sustainability, transparency, and traceability, I don't think they can exist without each other, So sustainability needs to be transparent, and it needs to be traceable, So that's what gives confidence into consumers and stakeholders in general. And regarding collaboration, I'm going to kind of pull it apart from the first question. I think collaboration is key for sustainability, because it provides that opportunities for that pre-competitive, thinking, that is at least in our case has been essential to accelerate innovation on one hand, and I would say the adoption of best practices. So a key example of that is how far the Global Salmon Initiative, of which we are founding members, has gone into adding value to the industry by making it more transparent. I don't know if we have many industries that will publish, globally every year as an industry, how much pesticides they use, how much antibiotics they use, basically the good and the bad, and that's been driven by collaboration. And collaboration at that scale probably also creates some sort of like kind of peer-to-peer accountability, some sort of like healthy peer pressure, if you like, that I think really, adds value and helps accelerate good practices and innovation.
Right. Thank you, Alfredo. Yeah, you raise a very interesting point there with the antibiotics, because there is a place in the world where aquaculture has, or at least marine finfish aquaculture has developed to a point unlike any other. Samuel, in Norway, we briefly spoke about antibiotics last week. Do you want to quickly share your perspective on antibiotics and reducing impact to the local environment?
Yeah, no, certainly that's brilliant what Alfredo was bringing up as well. I completely agree with the pre-competitive nature of organizations like the GSI, that it's very good because it's good for the stakeholders to get that information on a yearly basis from the sustainability report. But at the same time, it's good, as you said, you can, you sort of look over at the numbers from the other guys. You see your neighbors, how are they doing? Oh, well, we can do a little bit better next year, and they're doing the same thing with your numbers. So everybody's sort of pushing each other in a more sustainable direction. I think that's really positive. As far as the antibiotics go, it's as one of the big success stories, at least of Norwegian salmon aquaculture, that basically since the 90s there's been, well, one can say negligible, almost no sort of antibiotic use in salmon aquaculture, where you have a very small amount that is used on some farms. But if you compare it to, say, the amount used on humans or livestock, that you're looking at, under a percent point, and that's really been because of, I said, a big push from the industry saying that this is an issue. This is something that we don't have. We want to work with, and a number of vaccines were developed to allow us to get to a place where we aren't using antibiotics actively. The majority of farmers, I said, for at least the past 30 years. I guess the flip side of that being that as all of the good things that maybe an industry is capable of doing, that we're not as good at getting the information out there. So it was a Norwegian Seafood Council survey, I think, that was done in 2018 or thereabouts, where they asked consumers in Europe that said that they didn't eat Norwegian salmon. Why don't you eat Norwegian salmon? And the majority of them, I think it was around 90%, is because of antibiotics. I don't want the antibiotics in my food. And there are virtually no antibiotics in the salmon. So I think it's, getting the message out there, the communication side of it is something that people have to do a better job with. And then that's, and maybe another role for organizations like the GSI to help push that information out there. But as far as just, I guess, broad-based, as far as like my specialty and my role here at this company, and a big focus area for myself, it has to do with sediment around the farms and biodiversity and the impacts that a farm can have on there. And I think that it's very good for people to know, stakeholders and consumers, that the salmon farming industry in Norway, it's a highly regulated industry, and a lot of the same way that Alfredo was pointing out with the transparency of data that's published with the GSI, the salmon farming industry in Norway is extremely transparent, and the amount of information that's published every single week on open government websites like Barents Watch. So one of the issues, or the things that's followed up, is with sediment testing under the farms, where you're required to do testing around the farms to make sure that you're not causing damage to the biota in the seabed. And then those reports are then published on again, open websites where anyone can go in and read them. And of course, the ocean environment has hundreds of changing variables, and that makes it to where the technology to follow up seabed impacts changes over time. And now to where we've gotten to where we have pretty big advancements in modeling technology that can show the sedimentation of nutrients from the farms, long-term current measurements, hydrographic assessments that can tell you the optimal positioning for a farm as far as fish health and welfare goes, but then also for sedimentation of nutrients. And a lot of these models can also let you know how much an area can the biota in an area can take as far as a nutrient flow wise to restitute. So you don't go and decide that you're going to operate a farm. You're not going blindly into, will this lead to some sort of negative consequences or not? And farmers have been on board with adapting this technology, I think, by and by large, because we know that the sea is what we're living off. We're in these local communities. It's our local communities, and it's what we depend on. So in no way, shape, or form would we like to cause harm to where we're producing our fish. So yeah, right. I think that's it.
Thank you, Samuel. There's a great tie to feed when it comes to local ecosystem impact, right? Because there's runoff, because there's inefficiencies in the digestion. So Dave, feed is such a large component and it impacts sustainability greatly. What innovation do you see other than new and novel ingredients that will continue to reduce its impact here?
You're absolutely right, Moritz. Feed is a large component impacting the sustainability or the footprint of the final fish. And depending on what we're looking at and how we look at the different farming systems, it can be between 60 and even up to 90% of the fish at harvest is related to the feed and how much feed is needed to feed the fish. So I think there's lots of innovations, and I think one of the greatest innovations that's already happened outside of feed in the industry is in line with what Alfredo and Samuel have just talked about, is being able to measure and communicate and work pre-competitively to address these issues. And there's a degree of opportunities through associations such as the Global Salmon Initiative and also through CBOS to work together with competition and other parts of your supply chain to identify the big issues that are important for seafood, sustainable seafood, and to work together to identify metrics so that we can all talk in the same language, and then work competitively to find the solutions. And there's lots of opportunities for us to change the feed we've made. We're often charged to reduce the amount of fish that we use to feed fish, the amount of soy that's in there. We are charged to reduce anything that anyone could have eaten directly, or to reduce the carbon footprint. So lots of impacts that we can work to reduce. And in isolation, any one of those could be done. But when we're charged to make all of those in a feed for a particular fish, many of those factors become quite contradictory. And so we need to start to optimize what we're working on. And life cycle analysis, LCA, gives us a set of metrics which we can start to optimize in feed and also in the fish and document performance, which then allows us to communicate the progress that we've made, both with our customers and broader stakeholders. In order to generate difference, we need to work with our suppliers to ensure that their sources are sustainable with the raw materials that we use. And I'm really proud of the developments that they've already done for us. We've had great steps forward in our soy production to get rid of it, to achieve deforestation-free supply chains. We've had great step forward in our marine ingredients, working to source more trimmings meals, for example, and also with the forage fisheries or whole fish fisheries that we source to develop sustainable harvesting methods and ensure that those stocks are sustainable, not just for now, but also for the future. Novel ingredients, of course, are going to have a key role in the future of sustainable aquaculture as it grows, providing more nutrients, as we've said before. But it's the scaling of the impact of the feed once it leaves the factory and goes into the farm that's really important. And we can create a feed that has the biological capacity to produce a lot of fish, but the health and welfare of the fish on the farms and the conditions and the environments that we see on different farms, probably the greatest challenge that faces global aquaculture today. There are so many different environments that farmers have, not just in salmon, but across, not just across the world, but diving into salmon. Salmon in the north of Norway has different challenges to the south of Norway, and in Chile, again, different. So we need to have more solutions for farmers globally to prevent disease in the first place, reduce the incidences that occur, identify it rapidly when it occurs and accurately when it arrives, and then treat it responsibly and quickly. This requires quite a lot of changes. It requires regulatory support to be able to use additives that can help reduce the prevalence of a disease, for example, or to help support the development of vaccines that have been so successful in Norway. It requires knowledge development in the support services, particularly when we go to Asia, where there's a huge production of aquaculture, but very little knowledge and infrastructure support on the species that are farmed. And generally, I talked about Asia there, but everywhere we can improve our knowledge, particularly on how the environment and the health of it and welfare of the fish are interacting. And when we've delivered a base of healthy, robust fish on farm, then we can do great things beyond that as a value chain to help feed the world sustainably.
Right. Thank you, Dave. There isn't really a way to get around this nowadays, because I think none of us have ever seen an event that has been so impactful than the recent COVID-19 pandemic. Some say this has an impact on sustainability, a positive impact on sustainability for us. There's a chance to reset. There's a chance to follow higher standards now. But on the other side, looking at the economics, when a lot of people are struggling to make ends meet, they might even start trying to get around certain more expensive criteria that keeps them sustainable somewhat and take the shortcut to make the money. This goes out to everybody. How do you see the impact on sustainability here?
I'll comment. I think we need to keep the momentum going, you know, and that is the role of people that have leadership positions at different levels in companies and other and non-government government and non-NGO institutions, you know. So to not drop the subject. On the contrary, I would think that there's a big argument that you could make in the sense that aquaculture, at least in general, I'm speaking like from the aquaculture side, has a huge potential to help speed up recovery from the post-COVID economic crisis, because it's a food, so it's a food supplier. You know, it has some in many places very developed value chains that are tied to local communities. And it also has a huge potential for expansion. So what I think is that aquaculture has a key role to play or a potential key role to play in helping the world recover from COVID, but that will require a tremendous amount of cooperation between the public and private sector to get initially, you know, the permits for that to happen. So aquaculture has a bit of an issue with social license in many places, you know. Europe is an example of that. So for it to happen, you know, for aquaculture to fully unleash the potential it can have in helping recover, you know, from COVID in terms of the social and economic impacts, there will need to be a very strong collaborative work between the public and private sector. But there's definitely a potential there. I mean, it's probably one of the industries that can really make a huge impact, because it can make a huge impact on local communities.
Right. Thank you, Alfredo. Heidi, you've been on your remote island for a long time. How is it from the very special perspective of Hawaii, since the US is the most affected country currently, yet you are far out in the ocean and probably feeling the restraint, but not really living through the pandemic as it is, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We actually, Hawaii is doing very well, actually, in terms of the virus not being an issue here. So we're not quite like the other states. And, you know, here, sustainability has always been very important in our agriculture and our aquaculture, the way we do things here. And now, you know, people are asking, well, should we kind of be resetting our thinking about this? What can we do even more sustainable, especially since, 98% of our food is imported, and we really need to get away from that and just, you know, push forward on our establish agriculture and aquaculture practices and expand where we can as fast as we can. I mean, that's that's what all the editorials are saying in our local newspapers and on the radio. Super critical and a great time to really do what is right. So I'm very excited about the aquaculture and agriculture opportunities right now because of the COVID, actually.
Very interesting to see how something so devastating can actually yield some good on the other side. I'd like to just remind our audience out there, we are taking questions after the next question to the panelists. Panelists, please all submit your questions to the Facebook or YouTube chat. Thank you all very much for watching. My final question for our panelists before we go into the open discussion: in what way can early stage aquaculture innovation or ventures best impact the sustainability performance in the salmon farming value right now? Where lies that value that new ventures in the salmon industry can challenge? What are the key issues that are increasingly valuable to overcome?
Yeah, if I could go ahead and start and say something, I think at least with my perspective, I'd say there's this with not just novel feed ingredients, but I guess local feed ingredients is an interesting perspective, a lot like what Heidi's working with. That if you think about the whole building up the local community, things traveling as short as possible, and then things coming from like a marine environment, that all that's it would be an interesting perspective to see how that could disrupt a little bit there. But also for our part, at least, the whole idea of the offshore of avoiding spatial planning conflicts, leading to better environment for the fish and less environments that would have better hydrographic characteristics for benthic impact. That I think anything dealing with innovations in offshore technology and being able to move farms further out into the ocean where there's more space and less conflict would be of utmost importance.
Right, interesting. Dave, from the feed producer perspective, how do you see the opportunities for startups here, especially as somebody like Cargill working hard on integrating innovation? For instance, with Hatch together, we've been at this now for 2 years. What's your perspective on this?
I think in feed, we see the opportunity for growth of the industry, and therefore we need to capture more nutrients without drawing down on nutrients from other food systems, or moving into green areas that need to be protected to maintain global biodiversity. And so systems that can generate protein and other nutrients, such as algae, which aren't interrupting other food systems, really interesting. Also, areas that play into the circular economy and capture waste streams from other businesses, could be other parts of the food industry, could be completely different sectors such as the biofuel industry, and also the brewing industry have been areas of traditional interest for waste streams of nutrients. And I think there's an awful lot to be done there. There's been some work looking at the amount of trimmings waste from wild caught fish. We normally eat about 50 to 60% of the weight of the fish that's actually caught, and yet the rest of that is full of nutrients. And now the aquaculture industry is using a lot of material from that kind of a stream. There's also a lot we can do on land with waste products from agriculture, albeit whether it's plants or animal waste. And it's really about educating, creating the opportunity from an industry side of view, but also very much we need to be able to communicate the importance of this. And a classic example of that is in Europe, the retailer-led ban on using animal byproducts in salmon feeds, whereas in Chile we're able to use that, and that goes into the US markets, and is completely accepted. And that's a great use of nutrients that are available and would otherwise be lost to the system. So I'd encourage innovators in looking in feed to looking at capturing nutrients from systems that are completely unrelated to current food systems, and by doing that can really help all of animal feeds move up in terms of being able to bring more nutrients to the table.
All right. I would also encourage everybody out there who is working on their own aquaculture venture to have a look at the 2019 Cargill Sustainability Report, because if you want to know where the trend is going for such a large player and where you can latch on with your innovative idea, opportunity, you will probably find something in that report that will inspire you. All right, thank you all for the discussion. We will now move on to the audience questions. And Isaiah Gomez from Hawaii, I think recently actually moved to the mainland. Thank you for tuning in, Isaiah, good to hear from you. He's asking Alfredo to the former topic of transparency and traceability. How are these metrics traced? Is it through spreadsheets, or is there custom software dashboards that pull your data and analyze it?
Yeah. So currently, I mean, we have both. We have, because we're at least in our case, so I can speak for ourselves. So we're fully integrated from our brood stock all the way to our secondary processing. So we have independent traceability systems, or modules, if you like, that talk to each other at certain kind of intersections, that allow us to trace it. So a traceability system, basically has three components. So you have the traceable units. In this case, it would be sort of the fish that you're tracing. Then you would have attributes that you cling on to your traceable unit, the fish, which is the site it came from, the feed it was given, the medicine, the treatments it had, and whatever you can think of, these days. And then you have, your system, that allows you to kind of the railroad track that allows you to, trace all that from cradle to grave, if you like. So we're currently, in our case, we have a project that started this year, which is precisely looking at that railroad. We're looking at to see if we can make it more efficient. And I would say that there is definitely a lot of kind of suppliers out there that some local, some from overseas, that have come up with very good solutions that we're starting to explore, and they're all sort of blockchain-based technologies, which is where we see this going, because of transparency.
Right.
I don't know the question, but yeah.
Sorry. All right. From Singapore, Ben asks us, what are the top metrics that are used to compare feed companies against each other? I think, Dave, that might be one for you.
That's really interesting. I mean, in the sustainability reports from the different feed companies, we report to GRI standards, which was mentioned, I think, by Heidi earlier. And so we assess what our material topics are, and we report on those. And you'll see that when you look at different companies. But we focus a lot on the raw materials that we're sourcing and the sustainability attributes of those, such as whether the fisheries are sustainable for our fish meal and oil, the soy is sustainable and deforestation free. Moving into other areas that we look at, we're also looking at carbon reporting. And I know, for example, that can be really important to capture and communicate downstream to our customers. And maybe that's where I can open to others on the panel to comment about what they see as important for feed suppliers.
No, Dave, I could break in for sure that with you're speaking about, Dave, with a carbon footprint is something that we as a company in Nova Sea that we worked very hard on electrifying our feed barges and purchasing electric boats and things of that nature to try to reduce our footprint as much as possible, and the purchase of guarantee of origin certificates for our electricity use at our smolt facilities and the rest of our production. But what we started now with this, with as well as in accordance with the GRI standard for reporting, our accounting for carbon footprint outside, so what you'd call a scope 3 level, is if it's either transport to market of our fish out to our customers, or that the CO2 footprint of the feed that we're purchasing, which are both very significant chunks. So it's certainly a very big issue for us as customers, and all the feed companies that we work with know that going forward, that it's reducing that part of our footprint is something that we're really looking at doing, as well as the other things that we've already done and will continue to do for Scope 1 and Scope 2.
All right. Thank you. Something from David about FAQ, fair average quality in fish meal or dried meal. So he's saying, let's get down to brass tacks. Will the novelty discount outweigh the sustainability premium in replacements for fair average quality fish meal?
This is an interesting angle, and really, as he said, getting down to the nuts and bolts of the uptake of novel ingredients and what they're replacing. Fish meal traditionally has been an excellent and remains an excellent source of nutrients. That's why the industry had started with that. They're very digestible and they provide the nutrients that grow seafood very effectively. So to be able to replace them with or expand the raw material basket to grow the industry without drawing down on more, we need to have novel ingredients that can bring the nutrients, those nutrients to the table as well. Namely, if we're talking fish meal, amino acids in the right profiles, and some of the vitamins and minerals that are also in there. And then I think Heidi alluded to this in her introduction as well. It's about pitching at the right price point. We see fish meal fluctuating in price quite a lot over the years. And we see some of the startups pitching in at some of the peak prices in fish meal and thinking that, yeah, we can capture that. And actually, because we're a novel ingredient, we can even come in at a higher point. And this is where the coaching from Hatch becomes really important, because when we're doing the testing of these novel ingredients, often they don't perform as well as fish meal. And in reality, they might be a good protein concentrate. They might not even do that. And so there needs to be a reality check looking at how we're going to be able to bring these novel ingredients in, unless there is a huge downstream valuation of novel ingredients to pull the industry away from traditional ingredients. At the moment, they're just bringing nutrition to the table. And as such, they have to be priced against what they're replacing.
All right. Thank you, Dave. We have time for 2 more questions. So I'm going to go with a quick one here. I think at least the beginning of this is quick. Jerry is asking us 2 questions at once. He's asking, is data critical to farming, and how prevalent are sensors? Maybe that's one for Alfredo and Samuel mainly.
I'll just very briefly. I mean, data is. Go ahead.
No, it's all right. It's all right, Alfredo. You go ahead. It's okay.
No, I was just going to say very briefly that it is critical. You know, data is always critical. If you don't measure it, it doesn't exist. You know, as somebody used to say. So there are a lot of parameters that are critical on a daily basis. So absolutely. So in terms of sensors, I think there's increasingly a lot of sensors out there that are taking us to this route of precision aquaculture, if you like, which is probably where a lot of the gains in the future will be, by capturing new data that will give us more insight and allow us to, you know, capture those kind of marginal benefits, you know, of changing this or that parameter. I think probably Norway is more advanced in deploying some of these sensors, but it's certainly a trend that we see coming. You know, it's started already. You know.
All right, and the very last question from David Z. Alfredo, sorry, no, I skipped the line here. I would also actually involve Heidi in this question, because I think she's got something to say here, although he's asking Alfredo and Samuel directly. Are there sustainability or economic gains to be made through new ways of making carotenoids for inclusion in salmon and shrimp feeds? Heidi, I think you worked on something like that.
Yeah, well, so maybe I don't quite get what Dave is asking, but yeah, there's absolutely, I mean, the consumer wants to see wonderfully colored fish in their at the supermarket, And so how do you get that color? Well, if you're in aquaculture, you need to provide the color through the diet, unless you use black plastic for shrimp. But you want to have the best natural solution to that color, and the consumer, the endpoint customer, is asking for natural ingredients. And so we absolutely have to find the best natural, in the diet has to include natural ingredients that can also, they'll deliver energy, they'll deliver protein, but if they can also deliver pigmentation as part of the diet, that is terrific. And that is what we're working on. Other people may also have approaches that are being adopted. And that's really, we think that's really important for sustainability from the endpoint customer's point of view.
Right, and maybe taking that up the value chain a little bit with Alfredo and Dave. What do you think? Are there sustainability or economic gains on novel ingredients like that for carotenoids?
I'm not an expert, so I'll let Dave answer. But what I can say is that so feed is 60% of our cost, and we have to add pigment to every single kilo of feed that we buy. So it's a huge market. So if somebody can provide kind of a novel pigments, sustainable pigments, farmers will always be listening. Yeah? That's as much as I can say.
Okay. Any last words?
It's a great comment by Alfredo. Yes, we're always looking for more options so that we have continuity of supply. We have more different sustainability options and different price options. And when we create that, that's great. But I think also picking up on some of the points raised by Heidi, if there are particular claims that can be made on the fish through using more natural sources of any kind of nutrient, that is definitely important. And we've seen that in the market in Scotland previously with other sources of astaxanthin being used. And I think we'll continue to see that, and that can also support fish labeling claims that can be used, particularly in the North American market.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you all very much for watching. We are now out of time. We hope you out there all enjoyed this conversation, and we hope to see you again tomorrow, Friday the 26th at 10 a.m. CEST. We're going to have an interesting session on what it's like to be an aquaculture entrepreneur, mainly focused around Singapore. So if you're in the Asian region, definitely tune in. We hope you enjoyed this webinar with us today and would love to get your feedback. So we've posted a little survey link in the chats. And please hit that link, give us 30 more seconds of your time. Let us know if you like what we're doing here. Wherever you are, we wish you a fantastic day. Thank you, and until next time. Thank you to our panelists. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Aloha.
Right. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.